I think that the biggest risks are a lack of checks and balances. I think that it's already been proven that the old cliche that power corrupts absolutely. You know, the power to collect data in, you know, detailed formats about all aspects of your lives presents both an opportunity and a threat. It's the opportunity in the sense that if we understand things like what causes cancer and where and those sorts of things, you know, getting medical data from GPs and working out the incidences, that's a really good thing. Really bad thing is that if you collect that personal data, then, you know, governments are able to track your every movement and to work out, you know, exactly how you live your life. And the question is, what is the purpose of doing that?
I think the majority of risks really lie in data that relates to people or businesses and the risk of release of information which may disbenefit the subjects of the data. So I think those are the kind of the primary risks. And within government, it's possible to pull personal information together, the kind of data that government collects to administer its services in health and education, for example. And it can do that in closed, safe spaces and use that information to better provide services to citizens. But there's also kind of a benefit to releasing some of that data more to research community, to improve transparency and accountability around decision making. And that desire to make that data more openly available has to be balanced against the disincentive or the disbenefit that could accrue to the people who are the subject of the data. And this could be discrimination against people, it could be reputational damage, a whole range of things.
The other side of things is that not all data should be free. There is some data that needs to be kept private. The concept of open data and big data within governments is relatively new. I think that in many cases, governments are still struggling with the moral dimensions of what we do with data.
I guess this is one of the challenges with open data, is that there's data that people are probably unaware of the consequences of how easy it is to combine seemingly innocuous data for arbitrary purposes, which people had no idea of. And we do lots and lots of work in this space, so we can identify traffic jams in the city before Vic roads. You know, we can identify a cluster of tweets in space and time on the road is a traffic jam. And we can tell you which route to go, and we combine that with other data, let's say pollution data. So you shouldn't go this way because there's lots of cars, there's going to be higher pollution, go this route instead. So we do lots of these kind of mashing up data. Sometimes it's, you know, for good, obviously, but it's very easy to well, even just that example there again is an interesting one, because you're not supposed to tweet on the roads. And we know people who tweet all the time on CityLink or on Westgate Bridge. Again, you can use this data, but you shouldn't really be doing that if you are on the roads, and that's kind of illegal. But where do you draw the lines of what can we do with this data? So this is it's a very highly evolving space where there's lots of data being produced all around us, and there's people like myself who know how to build software to bring it together, to tell stories, but there is no cohesive governance across most of this. It's a little bit ad hoc, I'd say. Certainly in the social media space and linking it with other data sets.
In some ways, I think there's more risks in not sharing data than in sharing it, because a lot of the issues around security, around ensuring privacy can be managed. And I suppose the approach that we take at CSIRO is that we really empower the custodians to make the choice as to, they set the rules in terms of who is going to access their data and for what reason. So that helps to manage the risks of opening up data. So it's opening up data with some conditions in place.
I think one of the key risks is around personally identified information. So government, in the course of its business in providing services to citizens, collects information about people in health and social services and education, service delivery. It's been proven that actually doing analytics on the data and actually looking at joining together health and education data sets helps us get a better understanding of holistically how we can better provide citizens to services. I think moves in the open government, open data space have provided really some important incentives to change the default setting around data, which is that things should be open by default, provided government respects the rights of individuals and deals with these issues of de-identification of data, making sure that personally identifiable data isn't released, and doing some fairly rigorous risk assessment work to look at what are the risks of re-identification. Because often one might release a data set and not know what other data sets could be later released, which could be put together to help you re-identify someone. So there are some emerging techniques to understand how one can do a more rigorous risk assessment.